Hey guys, how's it going? Evening and happy Sunday. I hope you guys are having a good Sunday. So today we're going to be covering and going over. Let me fix my light real quick. I've been playing a lot of VR with the friends, so I gotta change my lighting up. So today we're going to be reading Matthew chapter 10. General discussion. If you guys want to, chat, have any ideas, and I thought it'd be fun actually today to have a not a reaction, but to watch a video talking about a subject within chapter 10, and then we can kind of discuss and see if that's something that we went over. So that'd be a fun change of pace. There we go. And gave them authority over unclean spirits, to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. The names of the 12 apostles are these: first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Forgive me for my terrible pronunciation. These 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, "Go nowhere among the Gentiles." Yeah, I did say nowhere. I had to do a double take. "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. You receive without paying, give without pay. Acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for the laborer deserves his food. And whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it, and stay there until you depart. As you enter the house, greet it, and if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake out the dust from your feet when you leave that house or town. Truly I say to you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town." Merit says you should try doing a stream where you pray the rosary. I'm not Catholic, so I mean I'd have to kind of like look into the details. So something I'll say about that, I have nothing against the traditions themselves. So my personal thoughts, yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I consider myself non-denominational, if that helps with that. But we'll see though. I'd be okay with looking into it and studying it if that's something you're interested in. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. And then talking about this paragraph here, I find rather interesting. There's a lot of stuff here. Now, of course, one thing I would caution people against, miracles are absolutely for today, but also be careful of people who go too far to the extreme in terms of being obsessed with miracles. I actually had an issue when I first moved out to the state I'm living in currently, and I had a buddy take me to his church. It was actually a bit of a culty church, unfortunately, where they believed they can pray and make anything happen at will. You don't want to take it to that extreme, And when I'm saying that, I mean they believe they can pray tornadoes away. Like, it was kind of ridiculous. Now, God could do that, but the point I bring up there is everything is to God's will, not ours, and to His understanding. So I just caution people about saying if I say something, it has to happen, right? Because there is that mindset. But something to keep in mind is this is still a guide on what we today could view or could see certain things. It calls us to go out, proclaim, the gospel, the kingdom of heaven, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers. We still pray for those things. And it still could happen, obviously, the Holy Spirit, but pray for those things and pray for God's will above our own. But if you go into the second section here, you received without paying, give without pay. Acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or tunics. They went out with nothing, but this is a consistent thing that we are told as well throughout scriptures, even for us, on giving generously, giving out of kindness. Something I love too in Matthew, I think it's Matthew 7, I'd have to go back and check, but when it describes the relationship between like a husband and a wife, you'll notice that it's very, submit and give to one another. Like, you cover each other's needs and nobody's left wanting, right? And this is very similar. I think it's such a beautiful relationship that can describe how we should treat each other in general. if you need food and I take care of you and I just give you food and I'm like, you don't need anything. I don't need anything from you, and I don't expect anything. But then when I'm down, you cover the same for me. I just think it's a wonderful example of how us as a community under God should be. He did say that people will recognize us by how we love one another. So I think that's really important. Hey, Gavin, welcome, welcome. What is your favorite gospel? That is tough. Romans is really good, though. I'm pretty sure it was Gavin, but me and Gavin were like gushing over Romans quite a bit. But there's a ton of them. I don't know if I have a favorite. Job comes to mind because Job is a harsh reality. It's talking about somebody who is very for God, right? He's very knows a lot of different perspectives and misunderstandings in this scenario. For those of you guys who don't know, by the way, I know you're saying a gospel, but I thought he meant just a book. I'm just thinking a book. Do you mean just like gospel? I thought you were just meaning like a topic. I'm sorry. I was thinking just a part of the Bible. I know it's not a gospel, Gavin. Stop being technical. I'll do a specific gospel, but I'm just thinking like throughout the Bible. I'll wait. No, I won't. You guys can. Yeah, just out of the four. My brain went instantly to the whole Bible. I'm sorry. I get obsessed with this stuff, so I got excited. I'll finish on Job and then I'll answer your question. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I don't know if I have a favorite. I like the different perspectives that they add. I like John a lot because it's kind of funny. You know what I mean? Where he beat, what was it? Matthew or like one of the other disciples, you know what I mean? He got there first. There's that meme that goes around a lot of that, but I like all of them because they add different perspectives. A lot of people like Luke, honestly. So, but with what I was saying about Job, I know it's not a gospel, but I got excited thinking of all the books. My bad. But for people who don't know, basically, very wealthy man, but very much for God. Had a lot of children, had a lot of land. Very well known. Basically, describes how Lucifer, Satan, basically had to go before what they described as a court setting before God. And it's interesting because he had to tell God, hey, he's only praising you because his life is good. You know what I mean? Take all that away and then he'll curse you in a second. It's interesting because Satan in this aspect had to get permission from God to do anything. Like even in today's world, he still has to get permission to God, from God to act, which is really funny if you think about it, with how people try to act like they're on even playing fields when they're really not. God, of course, allows him, you can test him, but you're not allowed to kill him. And as you go through, Job suffers horribly, so many losses. And he gets from several of his buddies, a bunch of different perspectives. A lot of people say, God's never wrong, so clearly you did something wrong, so you deserve it, right? You're sinning, you're just not being honest. Which, as we know, because we have context, isn't right? God's allowing Satan to test him, but other people are taking it as evidence, right? Some of his friends have multiple different perspectives. And there's a younger man who actually waited, which is wise, until after everybody was done. And he ended up speaking to Job and basically was kind of telling him, you know what I mean? God never says, oh, it's okay. No, you did good. He doesn't coddle him. The only time God actually speaks to Job is when Job finally ends up talking back and saying, I don't deserve this. I'm good. God, tell me if I'm wrong about blah, blah, blah. And God actually reprimands him. And then by the end of the story, Job ends up turning to God, of course, and apologizing. And God gives him more than he ever had. He ended up being blessed tremendously more. But what I love about that is all these different perspectives. We get added context that really shows that we don't know the whole picture, which is so important. And even when Job was doing good, and he was this high quality man of God, God didn't coddle him at the end and oh, you did good. The moment he was talking back to God, think like a parent, right? He still reprimanded him. That was the first thing he did. And I love that, that level of authority of and consistency in it. So it just shows so many different perspectives. So I really like that book. John is your favorite? Heck yeah. Clanad has a lot of Christian themes too, right? Yeah, I would say so. So if people don't know, it's a slice of life anime. It's incredibly good. It's pretty wholesome, honestly. There's one joke that you could argue that isn't appropriate, but even that's super funny, really not honestly that crazy. But it's very wholesome. I think because this is all on the topic of God, right? So this is this is perfectly acceptable for me. I want to recommend you guys because you said that, there's actually somebody specifically who I found recently. He's got like 10,000 subs, so he's not huge, but he's doing pretty good. Let me see. I want to make sure you guys have this put up. Yep. So it's the Christian Anime Podcast, and he does lives and videos, and his whole thing is how anime, how the Bible is like, referenced throughout these things. He even has, like you said, like right here, Clanad, how the slice of life anime led me closer to Christ, and he's basically talking about how those themes are prevalent in a lot of these shows and how it like equates to this, that, and whatever. He's got a ton of stuff, and it hits a niche and an audience that a lot of people I don't think are hitting. And I'm seeing a lot more of this recently, which I think is really cool. But I definitely recommend you go check him out. But you mentioned that reminded me of this guy. He talks a lot about this stuff. I think it's really cool. Oh, you know this guy? Yeah, heck yeah, dude. But yeah, no, Clanad has a lot of Christian themes to it for sure. A lot of familial love and respect that I really love to it. Nagisa is like the main female character, and she's like the purest character ever. Like, let's be honest, to be honest with you. Even if she's not my favorite like female character, like this is like, I think, objective. You know what I mean? Not how, just pure and wholesome she is. And she's like the definition of like, but what's interesting is that it's like her personality and how she treats people. You know what I mean? So it's very good. I would definitely watch it as long as you're not afraid of depression. It's very sad. But yeah, the Gospels I would have to think about, because I like the contrasting perspectives that they give, because I think they complement and add to each other. So it's hard for me to pick just one. KK, what's up, dude? Welcome. Gavin Peters, your favorite? Heck yeah, nice. Peter's definitely a good one. I'm like reluctant to say John because I feel like John is like the stereotypical one. Like I like John 3:16, but there's my brain's probably farting, but like stereotype ones. Going back to this paragraph that we were talking about earlier, mentioning that we need to be generous, and this is seen throughout the Bible, right? Receive without paying, give without pay. Like it's having this heart posture. Where I mentioned in Matthew, where it mentions, husband and wives, and I think this is good for our community in general, is to be giving, but it needs to be freely and charitably giving, like from your own. I don't believe, like for example, it's not an argument for socialism, right? That would be that's forced, right? You want to be a cheerful giver. You don't want to, you know what I mean? You want to give out of your, your own desire to do so, for God and for people. So I think that's a really good heart posture to have towards people, honestly. Even the woman, right, who was, homeless, she ended up giving, just on the street, her giving, like, what was it? Not 2 pennies, but basically 2 pennies, right? It was all she had to her name, and he said that she had given more than that rich person, right? Understanding how temporary things are, and do be wise with your money. If you're, married and with kids or with family that you're taking care of, take care of them first. The Bible is actually very specific about that. But also, once you build that trust with God, it really helps you to be more generous and like to care for people. Give without expecting anything in return. Exactly. But also be willing to accept help and be willing to accept love from other people. I was literally at church. I was literally talking with somebody about this today. Man, like, actually, guys, I want to ask you guys to please pray for James. He's actually recently Christian in the past 5 years. Elderly gentleman. He's sweetest dude ever. His wife is in the hospital right now. He has a I think David's autistic. I'm pretty sure. Kid that he adopted. Super sweet kid. He has a lot of stuff going on in their lives, and he's struggling. He's struggling like with health and like a lot of stuff. He just lost his job. He's going through it, man. So if you guys could pray for him, actually, I would absolutely love that. But I had to tell him a few times, like, call me if you need help. Call me if you need help. Because, him and I were kind of relating on struggling with asking for help and being okay with it, So, definitely pray for him, guys. I would appreciate that a ton. And whatever town reveal... And here's an interesting thing, too, by the way. And I encourage, and this is what I want of our community, be, as the Bible says, like, slow to speak, slow to anger, quick to listen. If we have somebody come in this chat and they're, like, atheist or another religion and they start bashing me, right, or start doing something like that, I want our community to be patient and loving and kind, right? Set a standard. Let's not, like, go back at them, but like, set a standard. Like if they do too much, you know what I mean? Like we'll set a boundary and kick them or whatever. But try to understand people's perspectives and points of view. Because there have been many times in real life where I'll speak with somebody and they'll start just going at me, right? Because I believe in God. And then I'll just not retaliate that way. I'll listen, I'll try to understand them, and then I'll explain my position, and you'll be surprised how many of them soften up. I actually had somebody, a woman in a group that I was in, literally because I was Christian, just go off on me. And months later, because, she apologized like the next day, right after she got to know me. And months later, like as we were leaving, she ended up giving me like a little bottled mustard seed. Like Faith is smells a mustard seed, that I still have in my car to this day. And she's so sweet. So they're not always going to turn like that. Some people are just going to, hold their breath and be angry at you and just walk away. But, that level of patience is so important. Don't let people walk over you per se, but, understand like doing that is just so valuable. Honestly, going to bring up so much good. Being able to receive help is the hard part of it. It really is. It's really tough to do, whether it be your ego or your upbringing. I was actually I told him this earlier, but in high school, because of how I was raised, right? I had a buddy that I hung out with all the time at their house, and their family loved me a lot. Like, they were really awesome. And they invited me to dinner several times, and I refused them every single time, but it was because I felt like I would have been taking from them. I'm like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, just be taking their food and taking this. Like, I thought that was rude. But eventually came a point where, do you think we're dirty or something? Like, is there something wrong with us? And it was at that point that I really realized, I thought I wasn't taking from them, but accepting generosity allows for connection with other people, and it allows, it drops that boundary, that barrier that you're kind of putting up. Because you can offend people by not accepting that help, And when you do accept help from other people, even if you don't need it, like, it's a good practice to do, to be honest. Like, let somebody help you up. Because we don't want to do it because it makes us vulnerable, but that vulnerability is what connects us with other people, So it's really important. And since that point, that has really helped me to learn to accept help from people. It's helped tremendously. Definitely praying. Thank you so much, KK. I really appreciate that, man. And he says to Gavin, it is referring to him saying being able to receive help is the hard part. It makes me feel incapable, which is something I'm working on. The biggest thing is just to practice saying yes. Bite your tongue and say yes. Because practicing that is what's going to make you more comfortable with it, not just the mind thing. Trust me, because I deal with the same thing, But my gosh, man, it's difficult. But there's that ego, right? Because we want to do everything on our own, like without God, I have another story later I can tell you about. Literally, I ended up kind of oversleeping a little bit, and I made like the last 15 minutes at church. Kind of embarrassing, but it was still good because most of their sermons like at the end where they do music in the beginning. So I still made a lot of it, and there's a really good thing he said that really hit me kind of deep. But it's really, really good. Gavin, to what KK said, it makes me feel like I'm charity when I get help. Doesn't it? Yeah, but notice and think to yourself, is that my pride talking? Is that my ego? If you're able to drop that, like, and accept help from others, you'd be surprised on how much connection people feel from that. I was basically, since a kid, like, I had to work on myself a lot to show any emotion. People literally called me a robot in high school, like, all growing up, because I was literally, like, if I showed emotion or cared about anything, I was looked down on, type of thing. So I had to practice that. But to me, like, if somebody would say something, I had to intentionally, like, bottle up my emotions. And it was so hard to get, to kind of change that. But it's allowing yourself to show that is like how people, see you, react, can empathize. And that vulnerability especially is one of the most relatable things to people, He actually said that in the sermon today. He said that we impress people by our strengths, but we connect with people by our vulnerabilities, by our weaknesses. So being willing to show that, honestly. And think about Jesus. That's all he showed, even though he's not weak in the slightest, right? But he allowed himself in that position for us, And then KK said, there's a veil over the eyes of unbelievers, so patience is important. Absolutely. And we also got to consider, too, there a lot of them, like, imagine, I told you guys about the whole, the church that, my friend brought me to that was, like, culty. They believed in, what was it, the prosperity gospel, which basically means if you believe in God, you're going to get rich. It's not that simple, but that's the gist of it. Like, if you believe hard enough, you will get what you want. Well, there are a lot of people who say, and I've literally seen them say this word for word, like they don't believe in God anymore, they don't follow Christ, because they said, I believed hard enough, and, I lost everything, and then my friend died. But I was told if I believe hard enough, that God would save them. So clearly it's wrong, or clearly God, doesn't like me or whatever. But you see, that's a false gospel. And they were really misled by other people and like what the actual gospel is. So I agree completely. Anybody you're talking to, you don't know where it's coming from. So be patient. It's really tough. It's 100% a pride thing. I'm full of myself. Felt. I'm working on that all the time, for sure. But here's a part that's a little contrary to what we were thinking about after, being openly generous thing. This is something that people are scared of nowadays. Be kind to everybody. Let them walk over you. Don't let them do anything. This is the part that if you even mention it, they get scared of. Because even if they agree with you-ish, the moment you'll mention stuff like this, they'll say, no, we got to love everybody. And it's like, I'm not saying we don't. But you got to understand both points. God isn't just love. He's also justice. He's also judgment, right? He's also all these other things. Not just one thing. And if the house is worthy, this isn't arrogance. This isn't us saying we're better. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. Look at the context afterwards. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, right? If anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet when you leave that town or house. Here's something that was tough for me to get, and this is going to go into that pride thing, right? Is when you're sharing the gospel, I do believe there's a point in defending it and understanding it and learning and advocating in debates. But, because I believe it's in Peter, where he says, like, always have, like, a defense or whatever ready. But we do not save people. We cannot force people to believe Christ. At the end of the day, we can provide good arguments. We can show Christ's love to people, all this good stuff. The Spirit has to lead them and they have to choose it, right? You can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. So when we're talking to people, like years and years ago, like 6-7 years ago, I felt like if somebody didn't, understand my view and start to believe in God or start in that direction, I thought it was my fault. I thought I didn't do good enough, right? And yes, you can always get better at how you present it, but it took a lot of I have too many stories, so I'm not going to go into all of them so we don't take up too much time. But it's not on you. Sharing the gospel is on you, and then you can do all the other stuff, whether you share more information, whatever. But having the wisdom to pay attention to who's listening and whose ears are perking up. If you see the people in debates, on campuses, Cliff Connectley, or there's this other blog guy, I don't remember his name, but he's really good too, where they'll be arguing with someone. Somebody will actually ask, like, he's clearly not going to listen to you at any point, right? Like, why do you even keep talking to him? They're like, I'm talking to him and, answering these crazy questions for the other people listening and passing by, right? There's so many times I'll see them talking and you'll see somebody in the background walk by and just staring, right? They'll be getting screamed at, cursed at, all this craziness. And there's that one person in the back who, like, way later comes up and they're like, I've been listening to you. And, like, I really, you know what I mean? Like, I want to know even for the person you're talking to. But it's having wisdom in knowing, listen, because there's other people listening. And then in other times, and if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. If not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, right? Shake off the dust from your feet and leave that house, right? Give them the gospel. If they're not receptive, you know what I mean? It's gaining that wisdom of knowing when to move on from, when to move on from it, And I'm not saying, like, give up on it, like, pray for them, but understanding when a conversation is fruitful or not. Because some people just are not ready. Or you could be planting a seed, But we can't force them. That's the biggest thing to understand. It's all on God. It's all on God. We are called to share the gospel, though, for sure. It said, I used to be an atheist, but I have since converted. Oh, that's awesome, dude. I'm really happy about that. Do you want to... It's okay if not, but I'm curious about your testimony, if you want to share it. KK says, Merritt, I grew up in the church, let my faith after my dad passed. Oh, I'm sorry, dude. And became agnostic for a few years, and have been back in my faith for about a year now. That's awesome, man. Honestly, like, stuff like that's so tough. I'm really sorry to hear that, dude. It's really, really difficult. It's one of those things where sometimes we don't have all the answers. And some people aren't okay or happy with that. And then sometimes we have some of the answers, but we don't understand why, you know? So there does come a point where, as we get to know God, we got to build up that trust in him, you know? But I'm really glad though for you guys, honestly. I think that's wonderful. Going on to Matthew 10:16. Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. I've got a video ready for us, by the way, to check out after we go through Matthew chapter 10. And it's actually talking about this verse. So it'll be interesting to see what they bring up versus what we see. Oh, Merritt said, I started going to Catholic school and it made me start believing. That's awesome, man. The only thing, and to each his own, right? So I'm not saying you have to follow me. I actually advertise everybody. The only caution I have, and I've heard this from, ex-Catholics and so on, is that they put too much emphasis on the saints and on Mary. So be careful of traditions. There's nothing wrong with them. They can be very comforting, but some people have admitted that some of them get to the point of like worshiping the saints or worshiping Mary. So I would just caution you to that. Nothing at that faith or anything like that. That's just something I would caution. So I'm definitely looking into it. But I think that's wonderful, dude, honestly. KK says, I've learned last year that his plans are so much better than we could ever imagine. So even if we can't see his plans, I'm going to trust in them. That's the thing, dude. Sometimes, I may never see the harvest, right? I may never see the good things that happen from it, but I trust in God that it will. But trust me, there have been times where I've asked God for something, and I've been so thankful that he did not answer that prayer. I'm like, dude, I was wrong. And then there's sometimes where I'm like, God, I'm not, I'm at the lowest point of my life. I can't, if this happens, I'm going to make the wrong choice, and I'm just not strong enough not to. And then that happens, I make the wrong choice, and when I tell you, yeah, I paid for it. You know what I mean? Like, God's way is the best way. It really is. It's very consistent. But I agree with you, man. He really has the bigger picture. He really does. The more we go through life, the more we see that. Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues. And you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake, to bear witness before them and to the Gentiles. When they deliver you over, do not be anxious how you are to speak or what you are to say. For what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and the children will rise against parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all of the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Yeah, and it's really funny. I see so many people who come to God, and one of the biggest things they notice is they're like, I thought believing in God was going to make my life so much easier. Nope. You have a guaranteed promise. You'll live with us in eternity with God. It'll end very well for you. This life is going to be harder. It's going to be much more difficult. There will be many blessings, but at the same time, he promises, struggle. So, yeah, it's a very common misconception, but for sure. On to 24. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? Beelzebul being like another name for Satan, or some people say it's a specific demon or something like that, pretty much. But basically, calling them the devil, calling them that. And it's very wise, honestly. Like, kind of explaining, you know what I mean? Like, if you're serving, like, if somebody in your house is calling one person, or like the head, like if somebody's calling God, all these terrible things and thinking that they have authority over him, how much more so to us, those who serve him, who follow him? You know what I mean? How much more are they going to be willing to do that to us? Have no fear. So have no fear of them. For nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light. And what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. There's another version, it actually might be here, that mentions that Jesus came to divide, not to unite. And it sounds interesting, contradictory to some people, because whenever a lot of people think of Jesus, they think niceness and kindness. Jesus is very kind, but I wouldn't say he's nice. There is a difference, right? Because you can be nice to somebody while foregoing what's actually better for them because it's convenient to you, you know. But this is very important. He said that he came to separate the goats from the sheep, right? He came with a sword. And if you notice, anytime we bring up sin, people get very angry. You know, it's very prevalent. So it's just a good thing to think about and to understand. Because a lot of people kind of try to make up like a fake Jesus in their mind that wouldn't reproach us for anything. And it's very much the opposite. Very much the opposite. For I have come to set man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household. This isn't saying, because the Bible does call us to honor our father and mother, which doesn't mean just to blindly obey everything they say per se, right? There's wisdom with that. But taking wisdom with this verse, we're not going to say that he is here to cause problems. What he's saying is that following Christ is going to cause issues and division because of how important it is. I have come to separate those who will follow me and who will not follow me, is what he's saying, right? And that it will come between families and households. Gorb, what's up, my dude? How's it going? Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. This is going to be tough. If I've learned anything in the past 5 years, my eyes have been open. Before 2020, I would say, you know, there are things you learn as a kid where you're kind of like, I feel like we're past this. You know, history repeats itself, you learn as a kid, and you're like, we're not going to deal with, you know, we might have, racism will always exist, but we're past it, right? You know, socialism probably isn't good. All these different things. And you know, COVID comes up and you got people saying that first responders deserve to lose their jobs, you know, because they disagree with something. I'm like, man, and all the things I've seen in the past years, I'm like, the world itself will flip on a dime and is ready to flip at any moment, man. You know what I mean? Like, the world isn't as unified on certain thoughts that I may think is obvious, you know, as I used to think, on things that feel obvious, right? So it's just something that I notice. I wouldn't do doom and gloom and all that stuff, but it's just something to keep in mind. And I bring that up because I often think, you know, there are a lot of people I know who aren't consistent, and I really worry for them because when the end times come, you know, when the Antichrist comes and he says, you know, follow me or you can't feed your family or live or I'll kill you. I feel like there are going to be a lot of people who claim God who are going to end up saying, but God will understand because, you know, if I don't do this, I'll die or I can't feed I can't feed my child. So I have to. I can see so many people saying that. And it worries me, to be honest. But this is so important. Whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. I think that's so important to understand your priorities in it. Everyone's saying ascend with Gorb. Ascend. Definitely look up Gorb on YouTube, guys. He's got some funny videos. All murdering his favorite character over and over and over again. Makes you wonder if he actually likes the character or not. Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. The one who receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and the one who receives a righteous person because he is a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. Dude, Matthew is so good, honestly. Such a good book. And then I'm going to go ahead and move us over to the video I want us to watch for today. But while I'm doing that, do you guys have anything you want to discuss? Any topics or anything? Let me get this set up. Just Corbs in the chat. It might show my studio for a second. I'm going to separate this so I can see all in chat while I'm doing this. There you guys are. And the video's playing good. Sweet. Alright, so this one, it's going to be pretty short. It's only 6 minutes. What does it mean to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves? Matthew 10:16, which is a part of what we read earlier, what I mentioned. Now, I watched only a little bit of this, so we'll see what he says. I actually don't know. He's going to go over it. But I always think this is such an interesting and important verse and how we approach people. So, let me make sure the audio is good.
What does it mean to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves? In sending out the 12, Jesus said to them, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." The NIV says, "shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves." Jesus was using similes, disciples how to behave in their ministry. Just before he tells them to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, he warns them that they are being sent out like sheep among wolves. The world, then as now, was hostile to believers, not incidentally hostile, but purposefully hostile. Wolves are intentional about the harm they inflict upon sheep. In such an environment, the question becomes, how can we advance the kingdom of God effectively without becoming predatory ourselves? Jesus taught his followers that, to be Christ-like in a godless world, they must combine the wisdom of the serpent and the harmlessness of the dove.
We'll get into that in a moment. One thing I do want to mention. So, just because he's saying one thing doesn't mean that he's omitting the other. But he said that this is about, like, how can we advance the kingdom of God effectively without being predatory. I do think that's important. A lot of self-reflection. But one thing I'll mention, too, is there are a lot of people who may even believe that they're being genuine, who actually are wolves and who are not sheep, if that makes sense. Very, very good pastor who does a lot of content on YouTube, very good for in-depth study. And there's a guy I used to listen to, actually, that I found out later he wasn't biblically good. Actually, there's a lot of manipulation. And he's getting a lot of backlash right now. He's getting a lot of people opening up and reporting about how he's actually a false teacher. And it's people like that who will manipulate and who are doing things intentionally for their own gain, who use and abuse the word of God for that. Like when you see pastors who are like, you know, if you want to go to heaven, make sure you give today, and then they go buy themselves a jet. Like, you know, Jesse Duplantis is an example. Like, I'm being very literal, you know what I mean? It's people like that where you got to be very careful. So even though I agree with what he's saying, when I think about wolves in sheep's clothing, when I think about this, even though reflecting on yourself is very important, so I like where it's going, that's more what I think of. So I did want to add that perspective on it.
Becoming predatory ourselves. Jesus taught his followers that, to be Christ-like in a godless world, they must combine the wisdom of the serpent and the harmlessness of the dove. In using these similes, Jesus invokes the common proverbial view of serpents and doves. The serpent was subtle or crafty or shrewd in Genesis 3:1. The dove, on the other hand, was thought of as innocent and harmless. Doves were listed among the clean animals and were used for sacrifices. To this very day, doves are used as symbols of peace, and snakes are thought of as sneaky. 19th century pastor Charles Simeon provides a wonderful comment on the serpent and dove imagery. Now the wisdom of the one and the harmlessness of the other are very desirable to be combined in the Christian character. Will be enabled to cope successfully with his more powerful enemies. Most people don't mind having their character compared to a dove's purity and innocence, but some people recoil at the image of a serpent, no matter what the context. They can never see a snake in a good light, even when used by Jesus as a teaching tool.
This is kind of like what I mentioned before when we were talking about, you know, God isn't just love, he's also justice and judgment and so on, where people get super hyper fixated on Jesus can only be nice to people. You got to understand the full character, and just saying that, you know, he wants us to be as shrewd as snakes Doesn't mean he wants us to be like in any of these, manipulative, evil, whatever ways. And they hyperfixate on. That's kind of what he's mentioning here, and something we need to be careful of.
But we should not make too much of the simile. We cannot attach the evil actions of Satan as the serpent with the serpent itself. Animals are not moral entities. The creature itself cannot perform sin, and shrewdness is an asset, not a defect. This is the quality that Jesus told his disciples to model.
Actually, a good point I want to bring up, by the way, guys. When he mentions this, and some people who view it like in that certain way argue with him, they were actually trying to trap him with their arguments and their words. But he would use scripture to actually answer them in a proper way, but he would also answer them in a way that wouldn't, get him killed until obviously his time, because, admit he was God and this, that, whatever. But they would intentionally try to say things that were hard, like in the Bible, to get like the mass of people basically to be, angry at him, right? Or to kind of disagree with him. So he wouldn't answer directly, because if you answered directly in that time, well, it was also not a part of the culture. They often answered with questions as well as just a part of how they do things, rabbis in general. But it was an intelligent way to go about it, because if you see somebody's trying to trap you, you don't want to just run into it head first, obviously. So that's where that wisdom, being wise and shrewd as snakes, kind of comes into play. So he does actually exemplify that in his, throughout the Bible and throughout Scripture, as the Pharisees are constantly, kind of at him, trying to catch him in something.
The serpent simile stands in Jesus' dialogue.
Oh, KK said something. Plot twist, I'm a girl, lol, but my husband loves snakes. Oh, that's funny. I love snakes too, by the way. That's awesome. I actually love, what's it called? My brain. But I love all those type of animals, personally. He would work with venomous ones if he could. Oh, that'd be so cool. I'll probably never do this, because I always think, man, I want to travel, and traveling with that's probably going to be so difficult. But like, imagine just having like a snake, like, think Orochimaru, you know what I mean? Like a snake just chilling on your shoulders. I think that'd just be so cool, honestly. So that's really awesome.
Without bringing forward any of the serpent's pejoratives. It's a basic understanding in language that when a speaker creates a simile, he is not necessarily invoking the entire potential of the words he has chosen, nor is he invoking the entire history and tenor of the linguistic vehicle. Rather, the speaker is defining a fresh relationship between two things. A quick look at Matthew 10:16 shows that Jesus was invoking only the positive aspects of the serpent. There is no hint of his unloading Edenic baggage upon his disciples. He simply tells them to be wise and innocent as they represent him. When Jesus told the 12 to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, he laid down a general principle about the technique of kingdom work. As we take the gospel into a hostile world.
Why are they all missing a left eyebrow? Oh, except him. He's missing a right eyebrow. And him.
We must be wise, avoiding the snares set for us.
I might be undiagnosed
and we must
ADHD,
be innocent,
guys. Just
serving the
FYI.
Lord blamelessly. Jesus was not suggesting that we stoop to deception, but that we should model some of the serpent's famous shrewdness in a positive way. Wisdom does not equal dishonesty, and innocence does not equal gullibility. Let us consider Jesus as an exemplar. The Lord was known as a gentle person. Indeed, scriptures testify that he would not even quench a smoking flax. But was he always and only gentle? No. When the occasion demanded it, he took a whip in hand and chased the money changers out of the temple.
This is something people ignore all the time, and it really irritates me. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to. So I had this conversation actually in a men's group, and somebody brought up, Jesus's kindness, and he was talking about the woman at the well. And he didn't see her, as, this other person, like a lot of the Jews saw her as blah, blah, blah. He was very kind and nice to her, and never once was he mean to her. I didn't say anything, right? Like, I wanted to talk to him afterwards, but you got to choose your fights. But I didn't want to. He was opening up about something else, so I felt it more important at the time, right, to kind of let him express that point of view on it. I felt like that was kind of like a little detail I can kind of like go for that. So I thought it was wise not to mention it because I didn't want to, get rid of his point or anything, right? But Jesus called her out, and when she said that, such and such isn't her husband, he's like, you're right, you have now isn't one, like calling her out for that pretty much. And I'm like, that's not a kind thing to do. That's a very direct thing, you know what I mean? That a lot of people would probably get angry about nowadays, right? But it was a kind thing to do, right, in the long run, but it wasn't a nice thing to do. So there's some more points to this. You want to understand the entirety of God, the entirety of Jesus. And be careful that we're not looking at just individual features, right? And applying it to everything.
Jesus' extraordinarily rare action, seen in light of his usual mien, demonstrates the power of using a combination of tools. This dove-like man of innocence spoke loudly and clearly with his assertiveness in the temple. In his more typical moments, Jesus showed that he was as wise as a serpent in the way he taught. He knew enough to discern the differences in his audiences, a critical skill. He used the storytelling technique to both feed and weed, and he refused to be caught in the many traps that his enemies laid for him.
Yeah.
Jesus showed that he was as harmless as a dove in every circumstance. He lived a pure and holy life. He acted in compassion, and he challenged anyone to find fault in him.
And when he was put up for trial, right? And they were saying, hey, what about Barnabas? We can let one of these guys go for you. We've got nothing on Jesus. We don't even understand why you want to kill Jesus. But this is like a mass murder, right? Why don't you just let him go? Because you've got nothing. I don't even understand why you want to kill him. And murder and several, even when he was sentenced to death, they had nothing other than his one claim that he is God, which he is the Son of God, right? You know what I mean? But it's just crazy. So he just lived a perfect example of this, that even when he was sentenced to death, it's not a religion where, well, they claimed he did this and we just believe he didn't do it. No, they literally just had nothing other than his claim to be God, right?
3 times, Pilate judged Jesus to be.
And then KK also says, as a teacher, I've learned assertive is not easy for everyone to understand, but it's different from being aggressive or mean. Exactly. And this is something a lot of people don't understand too. Like, for example, and I'll ask people this because I want to get them to think. I'll ask and I'm like, do you think anger is a sin? Like being angry? And they'll be like, yes, like right away without thinking. And I'm like, but what about, it's actually not. And what about this where it says, don't let your anger bring you to sin, right? Anger can be justified. Like there is a righteous anger, but God calls us not to let it bring us to sin. It's in the same way of dealing with people who deal with like sexual temptations, right? You can be attracted to somebody, but it's when it becomes lustful or further than that is when it becomes sinful, right? What a lot of people don't, kind of understand with that. So it's one of those, we can understand like, our weaknesses and things that we struggle with more. And the goal is to not let it lead us to sin, right? With a lot of these things. In fact, most things that are sinful, like the evil aspects technically don't exist. It's just a perversion of something that was good that God created, right? Like any sexual act that's wrong. Well, God created sex, and sex is actually a good thing. Like he made it, you know what I mean? So sin really is just a perversion of good things. Anger is showing you that you care for yourself because you're likely being mistreated. It absolutely can. Absolutely. I just find it interesting. It tells you, like, don't let it lead you to sin. Like, watch the actions that you take out of it. But the anger itself isn't bad in itself, for sure. But yeah, I definitely agree. It's a very interesting point. Also, you being a teacher, by the way, I don't know if you've already talked to Gavin about this, but he's actually a teacher as well. So maybe something for you to talk to. He's an amazing musician. Gavin, I got to get you to get that, to actually repost in the Discord that music video that you sent me of you playing. I actually got to save that, dude. He's so good. I definitely recommend you guys check that out.
An innocent man. The Apostle Paul also modeled
talented.
the wise as serpents, harmless as doves technique. Paul lived in dove-like innocence and good conscience before God, and learned to deny his carnal desires so as not to jeopardize his ministry. But Paul also displayed serpent-like shrewdness when he needed it. He knew his legal rights and used the legal system to his advantage. Yeah. He also carefully crafted his speeches to maximize the impact on his audience. In Matthew 10:16, Jesus taught us how to optimize our gospel-spreading opportunities. Successful Christian living requires that we strike the optimal balance between the dove and the serpent. We should strive to be gentle without being pushovers, and we must be sacrificial without being taken advantage of. We are aware of the unscrupulous tactics used by the enemy.
This is incredibly important. And too many people will take one side or the other, right? Being too gentle to where they're willing to let themselves become pushovers, right? And be taken advantage of. Because me being, stern on my boundaries apparently is, aggressive and mean. No, it's not. But people who set boundaries or whatever could do so in a way that's not very tactful. Like there's something I tell a lot of people is, I refuse, like, I will not sacrifice the truth for people. Ask me questions about things. Like, say, for example, I had, a very common one, right, about God, but they're gay and they're like, is this okay? I'm not going to say yes just until, they figure it out on their own. But I'm not going to be super aggressive about it. Something I like to do is I like to open up and say, hey, I struggle with, sexual sin. I struggle with, overeating, or I struggle with, this, that, whatever, and without Jesus, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a sinner. I'm going to hell on my own merit, right? Being, like we mentioned earlier, right, about being vulnerable and letting other people help you. In the same way, I'll show my vulnerability makes them a lot more comfortable because they don't have to do it on their end. But I'm also showing them, hey, I'm not saying you're worse than me, so you deserve it. I'm saying I deserve it. This is the answer and how I'm saved, right? So when I bring up that, yeah, this is wrong, I'm not putting you down, right? I'm just being honest with you because I care. So there's a difference between being nice and lying about things and being kind and tactful while not sacrificing the truth. And learning how and when to do that takes wisdom, which takes experience, which takes practice, and so on. So I think that is incredibly important in learning how to delineate between the two, and what situations to do what in. Or like what we said earlier, if people aren't willing to hear certain things, sometimes it's wise just not to, continue being involved in it. Like, state the truth or whatever, be respectful. And if they're not receiving it, plant the seed and move on.
But we take the high road. Peter admonishes us, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us.
Yeah.
Got questions? The Bible has answers.
I'm going to link this guy, by the way, in the video, in the stream afterwards. Let me see. Got Questions Ministries. That was actually a really good video. He had a lot of really good points. Didn't say anything that I biblically disagreed with at all, really. Honestly, I thought that was really good. So definitely go, give him like a sub and go check out his videos. That's really good. I actually really like that a lot. And then going back, KK said, ooh, I teach early childhood at a therapeutic development center. Oh, that's amazing. So we have children with and without disabilities. I also used to play, you used to play piano too? That is a sweet spot for me, by the way. I love piano specifically. I'm obsessed. I haven't practiced, though, like in years, unfortunately, but I love it. Haven't in a while, though. You're in for a treat if we can get Gavin to repost, or if I can find it. He, like, his playing, if you want to join our Discord, by the way, his piano playing's beautiful. Like, it's so good, honestly. I don't know if you've played Celeste. We have it on the gaming channel. But a lot of it, like, feels inspired in a ways, like certain areas of it. And it's very good. I highly, highly recommend checking that out for sure. But I'm going to say, unfortunately, the chat on the thing isn't working. Gosh dang it, man. I got to make sure it's fine, but I'll try to fix it. You're on Spotify? Hey, there we go. Heck yeah. But yeah. So that's going to be it from me. That was a really good stream. Honestly, I really liked it. Let me know how you guys feel. If you guys have any questions, thoughts, or critiques, or things that you guys want to see in the future. I kind of liked finding a video, honestly, like going over it. I enjoyed the conversation. I loved how you guys were getting involved in it. Honestly, it's so much fun. Love getting to know you guys and hearing your stories. And then I liked having like a little video at the end. I don't know about you guys, but it also offers like a different perspective and other people's thoughts, and how we can kind of talk about it and maybe just pique our interest, show us something that we don't normally think about scripture, which I think is awesome, and we just get so much about it. And then Gavin says, just look up Inidium Novum and my name. Expecting a lot from me to remember that fancy word. I'll copy paste it later though. But yeah, that's gonna do it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed. I appreciate everybody who was joining in and chatting in, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace.